Guys, today I set off on my biggest adventure yet, climbing Mount Toubkal in Morocco. This is the highest point in North Africa. It is 4,165 meters. This is my first time at high altitude and I was incredibly nervous. I booked a 3 Get Your guide and it was literally only 120 Canadian dollars. You start off with a bus driver and they bring you into the city of Imlil, which is already at 2,000 meters altitude. And from there you begin the hike pretty much immediately. The first day was around 6 hours and honestly I was already struggling. Not only was it incredibly hot, but I was already feeling myself really struggling to breathe. The first day's hike is up to the refuge at 3,200 meters, so you're gaining around 1,200 meters in altitude. Although this length of hike and the amount of altitude gained is not abnormal for me because I do a lot of hiking in the Adirondacks, up to around 1,600 meters. Because I'm already starting at 2,000 meters, this was definitely different for me and I could feel how difficult it was to breathe. This hike has a lot of meaning to me because it is something that I've wanted to do for a really long time and something that I've been working towards for a long time. Many of you who follow me may know that I have struggled a lot in my life, and for the longest time I really didn't treat myself with a lot of respect. I didn't eat well, I didn't exercise, I partied a ton. In my youth I had substance problems. I struggled with self-harm and suicidal thoughts as early as 12 years old, and I was in therapy for a really long time. I'm also an immensely codependent person, and doing this trek alone meant even more to me, knowing that my first time ever solo traveling was less than a year ago. You can see how excited I was here when I finally got to the refuge after all that hiking, because this was probably the hardest day of hiking that I've ever done. Everyone slept in the same room, which was honestly really nice because it was freezing cold, and you'll see in a second I'll show how bad the circulation in my hands was. Another struggle for this hike for me is the fact that I have a nut allergy and I'm vegetarian, so I actually didn't feel comfortable eating any of the food that the cooks were serving, which meant that I also had to carry all of my food on my back, which was mostly candy and chips. Not really ideal hiking food, but you know, you have to do what you have to do. Day 2 started at 3 a.m. and we had another 4 hours to the top and another 1,000 meters of altitude to cover. The start was honestly pretty fine. We moved at a really slow pace and I felt like I was handling it really well. However, as we got higher, groups started separating based on hiking speed, and I ended up with one of the faster groups, and although I could keep up, I was really struggling to breathe at this point. Every step that I took felt like the most difficult thing I've ever done, and every breath that I took felt like it was half a breath, which to be fair is pretty accurate because around 4,000 meters you're only at 60% of the oxygen that you have at sea level. I actually stopped filming after this video until I reached the summit because at that point it felt like life or death. The floor was moving in front of me and I genuinely felt like I was going to faint. I'm so grateful for my guides because they're the only reason that I made it to the top. There was a point where I was actually in the fetal position crying because it was just so difficult, and they encouraged me saying like, you're almost there, and that's the only reason I kept going. Here's me when I finally reached the summit, and honestly guys, I'm not ashamed to admit one bit that I sobbed like a baby when I made it here. Knowing the person that I once was who treated myself so poorly, to have hiked a 4,000 meter mountain now just goes to show that it's never too late in your life to turn your trajectory around. I used to think that all there was out there for me was partying and spending time with people who didn't care about me or my well-being. I didn't consider myself strong or resilient. And now look where I am. I think it's a really spectacular thing to prove yourself wrong and to be a person who's continuing to improve. You don't have to climb mountains to prove that to yourself, but whatever it is that you feel like you can't do, I encourage you to give it a shot because you deserve to live a life that you feel proud of and you deserve to love yourself.